Good afternoon. My name is Ala McCoy. I'm Director of Startup Support at the University of Maryland. I'm very happy to welcome to today's workshop our entrepreneur in residence, Doug Humphrey. Doug is a serial entrepreneur, investor, and just all around very knowledgeable person. He has built many startups, has advised many startups, and has seen many people go through figuring out what is it that different people do at startups, and when do startups need them, and when is it that they don't need them. So I am going to go ahead and mute myself and stop my video, but I will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So please feel free to ask questions throughout the session. And I will stop Doug wherever appropriate, or Doug, you can feel free to stop me and see if you have any questions. So, all right, Doug.
And away we go. So welcome to the webinar, or the, whatever they call these. Yep, my name is Doug Humphrey. I'm a serial entrepreneur. It's a horrible, terrible thing, but you know, it is what it is. I've started a lot of companies. I've had some really nice successes. I've had some huge failures. You know, I think I'm still ahead of the game in terms of the end score, you know. But you go through a lot, and startup companies are a weird cross discipline sort of application of knowledge. You know, very few places can actually just teach you how to be a startup person. You have to sort of learn all sorts of things, and you get some of them wrong and some of them right, and hopefully you get more of them right than wrong. And hopefully your opportunity works out. Specifically, in this case, we're talking about the roles of people in a startup, because startups are a blend, if you will, of you know, not enough resources, not enough people, opportunities that are not coming to fruition fast enough, and then all of a sudden, like a flood, are there, and you have to deal with that. And in an ideal world, the timing on all of this would work out, but we don't live in the ideal world. We certainly don't start companies in the ideal world anyway. So, so CEO, CTO, CFO, all these things, what does it really mean? So we'll look at startup roles, like you said. You know, I mean, there are a couple of rules of thought, schools of thought on how you name these things. You know, there's chief blah, 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 chief blah, blah, blah. And as you see from the current slide, you have CEO, CTO, CFO, CMO, you know, and you start to think maybe that C is sort of like superfluous, and you might be right. So they're also like president, vice president. You have another form of maybe directors or stuff. A friend of mine used to have a company, and they just called him the head clone, you know. So it really doesn't matter what you kind of call things, but there are people who say, well, it doesn't matter to, you know, that you need no hierarchy at all. I'm going to tell you that's just not true, because hierarchy and structure not only gives your people internally some sort of understanding of roles. In the military, you have rank, and rank can tell you a lot, you know, and it can tell you kind of where you fit in, and also who you can go to for what. And we don't really do rank, but position means something. But also, these positions are reference points into the your organization from people who are outside of your organization, because they don't know who that you know, the guy they really need to talk to is Frank or Jane, but they don't know that, but they do know that they're probably looking for somebody in marketing, you know, or they're probably looking for somebody in sales, or maybe even somebody in operations, you know. So having these titles and stuff really does sort of clarify structure for both the people inside the company and people who are outside the company, having to kind of make reference into the company. So startups grow. You fill out and structure the team So you base this really on the needs of the company, first of all. If you've always wanted to hire that person over there, that doesn't mean anything. Do you need that person more than you need any other person? And do you have the resources to get that person now? And do you actually have the need for that person now? You might say, well, I don't need them right now, but I'm going to need them maybe in 6 to 9 months, so I better hire them now. That really doesn't work very well unless they have a skill that is so irreplaceable. And just being your good buddy is not a skill that is so irreplaceable. Because remember, in that case, you're talking about you. And the company isn't about you. The company is about the company. And you'll learn very quickly to put that ego, that self-focus on the shelf when you need to. Now, sometimes you take it down because it's powerful juju, powerful magic. But you put the ego up on the shelf most of the time, because as the leader of the company, you're actually really making decisions for the company, not so much for yourself. So in the beginning, we have what I call the kind of the law of baseball caps. In the beginning, you're the CEO, chief clone, bathroom washer, you're everything, and you're wearing all the hats, 20 different jobs, let's say. But the good news is that each one of them is so minuscule in terms of you're not a real company yet, or you're just starting to get to be a real company, that you can juggle all those balls because they're not very heavy. But very quickly, you're going to discover, as the leader of the company, you're going to find things that are starting to grow too fast, and you need to hire someone else. You need to bring someone in to take this off your plate. One of the things that you have to learn very quickly is that just because you don't like doing it, that doesn't justify hiring someone else to do it. The company needs to need someone to do that job for you to hire someone. Oh yeah, if dogs start barking in the background, well, we have a lot of dogs, and phones ringing and birds. Let's see what the next slide is. So, dogs, stop it. So, wearing the different hats here, you only add to your team when you must, because you're very, very short on resources. Seldom does an early stage startup have one person only doing one dedicated job. Very, very rare for that to happen. It's very rare for that to happen. Yeah, I know you're recording this, so now you're going to get all the dogs. Flexibility is vital. Jack of all trades, king of none is fine. Most startup people tend to be super competent, high energy, and able to and willing to do or try to do anything that is required. And they may not be great at any of them, but they may be good enough to get the company built and moving. And that's what counts. Before titles, you really want to look at functions, and in a lot of cases, the titles or the functions map to the titles in a pretty rigid sort of way. But as the closer you are to the very beginning of a startup, the less rigid all of this is. Like I said, when you're employee number one and the only employee, you're doing all of it that needs done. So pretty clearly, there's no rigid mapping going on there. And then you're sort of peeling things away. If I'm writing the code for a product, and I'm not very good at it, but I'm writing enough code to kind of demonstrate it a little, then pretty clearly I'm going to need to hire a real coder to come in. That's an okay situation. I'm doing enough to keep the ball rolling and to be able to show an investor or show someone, a programmer, what we're talking about. And then a pro is going to come in and look at my code and they're going to go, this has got to go. And I agree. There's no pride of authorship there. I would be like, yes, that's why I'm hiring you. Someone who knows how to write code. And then she can come in and write code that I won't even comprehend. And that's fine because they're doing a much better job of it than I'm certainly doing. Let's see, next slide here. these functions all kind of move around, right? What is the CEO doing? What is the CTO doing? A CTO is not a role that you have very early in a company, for example. But a head of sales is something, somebody to drive marketing, to drive selling. Once you actually have customers, you're going to have to service those customers. So you're going to have to start to have, customer support. Each startup is a little different in terms of what order and how, and what order and magnitude they have to bring on functions, and what resources they have to do those functions. So people look for some sort of rigid thing, and it's not very rigid in the very, very beginning. All of this is more like tools to help you think about what you need next and who you need to go after and what resources you have, because you can't say, well, I need these 5 people, but I don't have any money. It's like, well, then you need to just keep doing all those 5 people's worth of jobs all yourself until you can get some money. So you got CEO, CFO, CMO, eventually as you get bigger, these things start to line up, right? And a CEO, generally speaking, wants to be a leadership role, helping everybody else. Leadership is a huge issue with all of this stuff. Almost nobody teaches leadership. Leadership is about the fact that everyone in the company doesn't work for the CEO. You, the CEO, work for everybody in the company. And nobody seems to get that, In all my companies, what's my number one job? Setting a direction that helps everyone go in a direction, raising money because everybody can't do their job here without money, straightening out internal beefs and fights, and the sales guys aren't talking to the marketing guys, who aren't talking real well to the techie guys. So I'm the guy who has to come in and get between these groups and work things out. In the end, they don't all work for me. I'm not sitting in Hawaii enjoying the view. I work for them, and I'm doing 28 hours a day trying to get the company and the people in the company and the products of the company what they need in access and leadership to make it all work. The chief financial officer, this is someone who knows the numbers and rides shotgun on the numbers, make sure that all of us are aware of the numbers and understands what the funders need. Mark Sullivan is raising his hand. I get a little note here. 2 participants have raised their hands now. Hey, Ala.
Yes, I can go ahead.
Find out what the raised hand guys want.
All right. Mark, you can go ahead and ask a question or comment.
Mark. I'm not hearing anything.
No, it might have been, sometimes it's a mistake. And then let's see. Okay, we have another raised hand. Will, did you have a question or comment?
I'm not hearing anything. I think this is how the revolution starts, actually. These are the ghosts in the machine. Well, okay, we'll keep on going.
Yes.
So titles, functions, org chart, individual professional skills and abilities, education, networking, time and availability. Okay, every person is different. If you want to find the stage where your individuality is the most on display and the most involved in determining what you're doing for the company, it's a startup, because sometimes, let's say there are 3 or 4 people in a startup, something comes up and you all kind of look around the table and go, does anybody have any clue on how to do this thing? And maybe somebody goes, I did a little of that, and before you know it, everybody goes, excellent, this is your job. So large corporations will tend to kind of like pigeonhole you. They want to be able to describe you in a more standard way. Startups go the other direction. I mean, startups don't have the luxury. So individual professional skills and abilities there's no telling, but everything you know and everything you're good at may very well be an asset to your startup. And that's a good thing. Education. Education is both valued because it will give you more capabilities, and also less valued in that it is not a requirement in most startups that you have a degree. It's not, oh, well, we need master's degree or less here or something. Most startups, unless they're doing something in a field where there's an external requirement for degrees, most startups don't have the luxury of being able to turn down someone who might not have the requisite degrees that one would normally need in this kind of a world. Networking turns out to be tremendously important, mainly because you are a better resource to your company if you are a better networker and have a better network of people who can contribute to the company, can help get the company things they need, or even if you're in your network, you may find that your network is going to provide employees to the company, that most of us work our networks. If we're working for a company that's expanding greatly, most of us work our networks to try to find and bring good people who we know and who we can vouch for in, because that's safer and better. And then time and availability. A lot of people are going to start into a startup not in a full-time capacity. So time and availability, you may be the best person in the world for the job, but your world, maybe you have a mortgage, maybe you have kids, maybe you have other assorted commitments that you cannot walk away from. Your commitments, time, availability may not work out for you to be able to really hook up with a startup until later in their evolution, when they're able to actually offer you a full-time job with benefits and with pay. When you're just you can do things like say, well, I can work for very little money. I can live on ramen noodles, and I'm young and healthy, and I can skip my health insurance for a while, Whereas if you've got a family and as you move through life, you make more and more commitments, and you need that base. I've had people who have wanted desperately to join one of my startups, and I've had to basically say no to them because I know their family situation. I know their situation. And I'm like, dude, I'm not going to be able to, it'll be more than a year before I can offer you anything near what you really need. So I'll keep you in mind, but I just cannot in good conscience be culling through my fanatical young friends into my startup at the detriment to their lives, Yeah, I mean, titles and stuff. Well, this is just saying these things are flexible, why titles? And we go back to this a little bit. External titles tell outside of your company, tell people who the correct entry point is or correct way to understand your company. Internally, they're part of a structure that gives people a little more confidence in who's doing what and that they know who to talk to. There are companies that have multiple titles. Early on, it's not uncommon to actually carry a few different business cards with different titles, and I mean, that might sound funny to you, but it's about giving these external pointers the right entry level, I mean, if I'm the head of sales and I'm the CEO, if I'm in a selling situation, I probably don't actually want to give them a CEO card because that's a little confusing. I let them know later that I'm CEO. Right now I want to say, oh yeah, here, sales, call me. We'll get you hooked up with a demo and I'll get one of my tech guys to talk to you, and then let's get you some product. And that's fine. And then later on, if they also find out I have like another job as CEO, they'll think it's funny, but I'm not trying to fool anybody. I'm trying to give them the most useful information so that they can work with our company. CEO, top of the heap or the bottom, like I said, it's really one of these things where there's a reverse relationship to what most people think. Most people think, that you lead from the top. And sometimes you do. Sometimes that's what's called for, sometimes you lead from the bottom, if it is at all possible to do it, when people get there in the morning, it's kind of nice if you're already there, or, whatever the equivalent is. My company, we started by noon if we were lucky, but then we worked until like 4 in the morning. We'd be leaving when the sun is coming up. I remember the first time we hired someone to do, we were desperate for somebody who would please come in the morning. And I interviewed this nice lady, and she was just getting out of the Air Force, I think. And, I said, well, what's your morning routine like? She's like, well, I'm usually out running. I run a couple miles like 6 a.m., but I usually get up around 5, I said, so when do you think you might be able to get in here? And she's like, well, I could easily be in by 7. I offered to pay day differential, we'll pay you more money for that. So that was good. You're the captain of the ship. You take responsibility. Sometimes things go horribly awry. And there's a lot of finger pointing, and you have to cut through that, because finger pointing just isn't helpful. At some point you just say, look, I'm taking responsibility for this. I'll take the hit. Let's go solve this problem. Integrity and honesty. You have to set the example for everyone else, because as soon as they see you do something shady, or you be, stupid about something, everyone will take it as license to be shady and do stupid things, and I mean, that's terrible to say, but really people look to leaders and leadership to set. I know that sounds old fashioned, because nowadays, you see what your leaders are doing, but you set a standard of integrity, a standard of honesty. You behave the way you want them to behave, and people will follow you. Loyal to the company and to the employee. I, as a leader, must show a level of loyalty. I can't make up excuses why I betrayed the company or someone else, or wasn't there, or, didn't care. Because again, whatever you start is going to roll through your organization. It's terrible. And you're not necessarily the original founder. There are a couple of things here. The CEO, you can have a new CEO come in. You can have new leadership come in different forms. A lot of different ways to do this. And generally speaking, you do report to the board of directors. There's usually some group of people up above you. And you really want that, because you do want some people who can give you feedback. You want your employees and partners and everything to feel that they can give you feedback honestly, tell you hard truth. But you still want a board who can say no, right thing to say, and really you.
There's something wrong with your sound.
Everything okay?
Yeah.
You want someone who will help you say no when you really, really, really want to say yes. It's a big thing. Chief Financial Officer. You don't usually need one of these instantly, but as soon as you start raising outside money of any significant amount, you're going to probably want one of these, unless you yourself are a pretty darn good one of these. It should be noted. Generally speaking, CEOs are sort of fall into one or two or three categories. Most are not what you call the triple threat. You have tech, you have sales and marketing, and then you have finance. I could do the tech and the sales and marketing, but the finance, I run out of steam pretty quickly there. And it was always better for me to pick up at least a part-time CFO early on. And I think most of my financial backers, the venture capital guys and all, understood that and would be like, yep. Don't burden Doug with, with the numbers on the finance, because they like to see it in a much more detailed way than I really cared about. Accounting, financial strategy, financial analysis. You can outsource this initially. This is never really a full-time job right off the bat. We first got at Digex, our first full-time, financial CFO guy when we had, 30 or 40 employees probably by then. It's my guess. And like I said, most professional investors, once the VCs start handing you millions of bucks, hold on a second. Hey, Tegan Bento is out front. But, once they start doing that, then, you're into a CFO. Chief operating officer, they keep the trains running on time, day-to-day internal operations. If you're a networking company, they're making sure the network is working. If you're a widget company making widgets, they're making sure that the machines making the widgets are working, Again, you don't need this day one usually, because usually you're the first person doing this. But at some moment in time, you run out of horsepower. Now, what parts of the company would report to the CEO or would report to a COO? That's highly variable. And that will depend very much on simply what your company is, how your company works and is structured. So that's the CFO is Chief Financial Officer. It's pretty kind of cut and dry a little. Often you'll find a CFO who can actually be your COO. That works pretty well for a while too. Chief Marketing Officer, again, you're the CEO and you're the startup guy and the entrepreneur. You're probably doing all of this work. You know your product best. You are probably the best person at marketing these things. But at some moment in time, you can't just be the full-time marketer, because this is going to start, when you start doing trade shows and you start doing other things, you have all your online and social networking and media stuff that you have to do. You will pretty quickly find that, if your company is really going gangbusters, that you're going to have to bring someone in who's going to do this kind of stuff. Chief Sales Officer, VP of Sales. When you have one or two or three sales guys is being a non-gender term here, sales folks, they're reporting the CEO. Of course they are. The CEO knows all this stuff, but very quickly, if they are basically, your sales and stuff is growing and you're really starting to bring in specific full-time salespeople, et cetera, at some point, you're definitely going to have to hire someone to manage them. It should be noted, you will always find the sales guy who wants to manage all the other sales guys. This never works out, because what's really going on there is a sales guy wants a cut of everyone else's action. Generally, the really good people who manage sales guys are not themselves sales guys, or maybe they were sales guys for a long time, but they realized that they didn't want to carry the bag. They didn't want to do that job, but instead that they would move into management. So you do have to watch out, because sometimes you don't want the shark managing the sharks. That doesn't work out. Product roles. So depending on what your product is, could be software, could be chemistry, could be, physical manufacturing. It can be on, anything. You have three sort of phases any product implies there has to be development, unless you're buying the product from someone else, and then you're like rebranding and marketing yourself. You have development, because obviously no product is just instantly whole, and also no product is always correct forever. Right? All products evolve. So you have to have some development. You have operations. Almost all products need to operate. They need to either be built and shipped. If they're a physical object, these things get built and sent. Or if it's a service, then the network or whatever the service provision needs to be operating. Someone has to be responsible there. And then any product implies customers, and customers imply support. There are very few products that are so simple that there's no support component to them at all. And in fact, the minimum support is that customers like to be taken care of, and at least they like to imagine that you probably care about them. So you have these three roles in the product world. You have development, you have operations, customer support. So a case study, let's look at Jane. Jane is the founder. So she owns 100% of the company. It's good. So Jane is doing everything Jane can do. And Jane is like a one-armed wallpaper hanger right now. She is going at 10,000 miles an hour, and getting done everything that anyone could possibly get done. And it's not enough now, because her company is starting to get a little traction. And now, what is she going to do? Well, let's say that she runs into a guy named David. Now, David, it turns out, is, a developer guy, and Jane is clearly a developer, but maybe, Jane wants to take care of other things and development too, whatever. Like I said, as the initiator, the founder of a company, the science is the giving away. The science is the taking off of hats. The science is the assigning duties and dealing with this. Because if you don't do that, you'll implode. You'll be crushed under the load. So Jane and David hit it off, and Jane goes, David, you're the right guy to come in and help me do this stuff. And David, one presumes, is enthused, because you would never you'd never do this for someone who's like, maybe, But hopefully David is like, hells yeah, let's go take over the world and do this thing. So, it's an early stage company, and David, let's say, is available to actually quit his day job or whatever, or whatever it is. He comes not just with the ability to do the work, but maybe with the ability to self-fund while doing the work, So boom, David gets about 30% of the company. Now you might say, that's a huge piece of the company. Well, but you're doubling or more than doubling the bandwidth of the company, because right now you just have Jane, and now you have Jane and David. Okay, that's worth 30%. Now we could talk about details. So Jane and David are rolling along, but they decide that they want to have this company. So they need a board of directors. Now the board of directors should be either 3 or 5 people. Always has to be an odd number. 5 is as big as you want it. I mean, if you've taken $20 million in VC money, then this piece of advice I'm giving you is obsolete and gone. But 3 is the minimum number. Because, and Jane is the founder. So Jane's going to be one of those people on the board. So you're going to pick up 2 more board members. Okay, that's going to be 2% of the company, because you're going to give each board member options. By the way, these are all, when I say give, I mean stock options vesting over a period of years, not outright, here's 30% of my company, so you can run off to California and go surf and own 1/3 of my company and not contribute. No. So, 1% each for the board of directors, 1% each for an advisory board. Let's say that's 3 people. It might be 4 or 5 or 6 people, and it'd be less than a point each. Board of directors is only 2, because Jane presumably is not taking an extra point from herself, because remember, she owns the whole company other than points that are given out to other people. Let's say that there's some consultants and lawyers will budget like a 2%. Now you might say, well, why aren't you paying them cash? Well, the answer is because you don't have any cash, or more to the point, you're paying them stock option points because you've got lots of that right now and you don't have a lot of cash, and you have to save your cash for things that can only be paid for in cash. So friends and family comes up. You decide you need some money, and no one will give you money yet because you need to make everything a little more real. So let's say friends and family puts together 50 grand for you, or whatever, 20, 30, 40, 50, And you say, well, that's worth 3% of the company right there. So there's 3%. Now, you've actually got some customers going. And the problem with it is that customers, you got to love customers, but customers are a pain, and then they need care and taking, and they need attention paid, and you can't do that. So let's say that David is mainly a developer hammering away on trying to make the product work, and Jane needs to be doing everything else. But so the good news is Jane has sold 2 guys on this product, and the bad news is they're on the phone with her every single day, taking up her time. And Jane is like, I'm working 30 hours a day now, and my 2 customers are hammering me, and this really sucks. But Jane is in some situation where she runs into Wanda, and she and Wanda are talking. And Wanda's like, well, I'm actually head of, a customer support teams for, a company, hopefully maybe one in this area of this topic. But, Wanda says, look, for some participation here, I could come on board and run your customer support. And that would free you up. And Jane looks at that and does a little math in her head and goes, so for a little stock option action here, I can actually get like a third of my life back. Yeah, this is a good deal. So a deal gets done. Wanda gets 15%, stock options. And now Jane all of a sudden can function again in things other than just answering questions on the telephone. And at some moment in time, they have enough of this going that funder A comes in, your first round of actual professional funding. So now let's look over to the right. I didn't show you the whole math spreadsheet here. Maybe it's later, I don't know. But after funder A puts in their money, which is $500,000, when the smoke all clears, because of the way dilution works, Jane had 100% of just Jane. Now she's got 1, 2, 3 employees, the boards, and a funder coming in, and she still owns 60% of everything. Product development, David is from 30 down to 18, because as new funders come in and you issue more shares, your percentage ownership of the company comes down. This is called dilution. The advisory board started out with 3. They're still giving industry advice. They're at 1.2%. Board of directors 2, 1.2%. Consultants, lawyers, 1.2%. Your friends and family who had 3% ownership for the 50 grand they put in, they're at like 1.6. Wanda at 15 is down to 9. And funder A came in. They just came in, so they haven't really been diluted by much. At 15% of ownership, $500,000 that they hand you on a $3.5 million valuation. That's what they figure it all was worth. They have about 14%. So this is, the dogs don't like that, obviously, but this is pretty good. So that gives you some sort of feel for, there's a whole class on dilution that we could do. We probably should do. So why don't we say here, any questions on any of this? Because I know that this is especially vague. It's especially with titles. I want to give some sort of framework a little bit, but the reality, of course, is you do what you got to do, and it comes out like it does.
Thank you, Doug. It has been great. Thank you so much. So we're open for questions. You can either submit them via the Q&A function or chat or raise your hand. So first question is, please reiterate the recommended number of advisory board and board of directors members.
Okay. So now so to be careful, there are two different boards that a company usually has. And you'll understand, I think, pretty clearly once I say it, you'll get it. A board of directors is something that is literally required by your incorporation as a corporation or as an LLC or anything else. They all pretty much require you put together a board of directors. More to the point, even if they did not require it, okay, look at the window. A gigantic deer is right out the window. So, a board of directors is a requirement, basically, and you would want one even if it wasn't. A board of advisors is not a requirement, but you'll see how you pretty much always end up getting to them. So your board of directors it'll have a bunch of roles, the secretary, the chairman of the board. You can read up about these things. There are books about them. The correct number for that when you start up is 3. First of all, you never want an even number, because in an even number, then you can have a deadlock in voting. The board of directors is sort of the final arbiter for decisions in the company. If there's a big disagreement on whether you were going to do something or not do something or whatever, I, as president of the company or CEO, I could just dictate, and in fact, if I own all the shares or most of the shares, I can dictate. But it's not a good idea maybe to dictate. You have to be very careful with this, If most of your people say, I don't think we should do this, and you're like, no, we are doing it, then you are forcing a showdown. And that may not be a very good idea. You might be like, well, I was in the right to do this. Yeah, but 2 out of your 4 developers quit, That's not good. So what a board of directors does is it allows the CEO, who's an operating person, the president, to pass the buck to a board of 3, of which the CEO certainly is one. So they can pass the buck up to another group of people who are actually more detached from the day-to-day operations, but are hopefully well-informed, and who can then help make a decision in a way that the decision can be better respected in the organization and not seen as simply one person's decision. Because people like to think that they're listened to a little bit, and they like to think that some rationale is there, and that it isn't just the president of the company acting like a dictator. Also, if the CEO sort of gets out over their tips a little bit, and makes some bad decisions, they can kind of bring them back by saying, well, I know last night we were all drunk and I said I would sell the company for $5. And now you're here saying, oh, that's a binding whatever. But I want to remind you that nobody can sell this company without approval of the board of directors. And they don't even meet for another 90 days. And I don't think they're going to ratify some sort of decision I, as CEO, might have made to sell you the company for $5. So go away. So a board of directors is a good thing. Plus, let's say that your head of sales, things are squirrely, things are weird. You think you need to get rid of this person, but you really need some advice. The board of directors is you and 2 other people, and those 2 other people are hopefully chosen for their business acumen. I mean, they're probably people they're probably not strangers, but They're chosen as people who are steady, solid citizens, so to speak, people who are going to be able to think about this and give you, the CEO, who might be in the middle of kind of an emotional state, give you good, solid advice. The board of advisors is not really an official thing at all. But what you end up doing quite often is, let's say we were in the vaccine business, or let's say that we're in the quantum computing business. There may be people in the industry who we want to have a close relationship with. So you might go to your friend at this place or that place. You have to be careful. You don't want a competitor per se, right? But someone who understands the chemistry, someone who understands the industry, marketing, someone who understands some aspect of it that you really want. And you may say to them, hey, I'm starting this company, or I have this company running, and I would really like it if you would come onto my board of advisors, because I value your advice. And I really want to give you an open channel, meet every 6 months, meet every 90 days, whatever, but I want you to have an official status with us. Oh, and I want to give you some stock options in order to do that. Now, what you've done here is stock options align interest. So if Joe Blow hears something about some interesting opportunity, and he's on your board of director or board of advisors, then he has some shares in your company. Where do you think he's going to steer that business? He's going to steer it to you. He has an interest in an enlightened self-interest in helping you out and helping you and your company out. And I mean, he's not going to wander around and be a shill for you, but I think that this is going to be, you want a relationship where they can actually be proud of being associated with you and can help you out wherever possible. So board of advisors does not have really an optimum number per se. I would just stick with 3, 4, whatever, because they don't actually vote on anything. So a board of advisors has no power, so you don't have to worry about a deadlock voting situation. So you can be pretty much whatever you want with them. What you do want to do on all boards, board of directors and board of advisors, is you want to set up some staggered automatic resignation dates, right? Where they come on and they're only on for 2 years. And you already have a signed resignation from all of them. The board of directors and the board of advisors give you an undated, I resign, thank you for the opportunity, undated, signed, that you, the CEO, put in a file. And that allows you to wipe them all out if you need to do it. Because guess what? You're the CEO, and little power trips from some sort of board members or whatever the hell, you don't have to sit around for that. So you can just fill in those dates and send it to them and say, your resignation is accepted. I thank you very much for your contribution to the company, and I wish you great success going forward. And that's it, and then you can get yourself new board members. So, the board of directors, you need the odd number. 3 is the perfect number to start with. And then when an investor comes in and says, I want a board seat, then that will make it 4. But even numbers are not acceptable. So you'll add a second seat. So that will make it 5. And boards of 3 to 5 are fine. They're great. They're easy to manage. It's not hard to get a quorum. It's not hard to get, everybody there. It's great. Another investor comes in, they say, I want a board seat. What you can do is you can ask that 5th person who you put in to balance it, you can ask them to leave. And then you can put that investor in there. So now you'll still have 5, but you'll have yourself and outside investors or outside board members, and then investor or inside board members. There are ways to work it. And then, so it isn't until the 3rd investment firm, and they all have to ask for board seats, and some of them won't want them. There are plenty of investors out there like, no. They'll want what's called observation rights, which means the right to show up and observe a board meeting, but non-voting, or information rights. Information rights are just called, fundamentally, after the board meeting, you send us the board package. You send us all the data. The CFO sends us financials, et cetera, but they don't actually show up. Does that help?
Yes, thank you, Doug. And I also posted a link to a workshop that we did just, I believe, last week on how to build an effective board of advisors or directors.
I saw that. It was very good.
Yeah, thank you. So I posted a link to that. It's on YouTube. So there's a question that we have. What is typically the first role you would hire for a high-tech startup?
Well, it depends. It depends on what. So the first hire, of course, is you yourself. But guess what? That may not be the first person who you're actually paying. So let's say I'm going to start up a company. One of my companies, Digex, I was employee number 7. I hired 6 other people before I was ever actually put on the payroll. And I had a day job for the whole, first almost year, I guess. I had a day job and I did my day job. And then my day job gave me a sabbatical. So I just took the cash equivalent from the sabbatical and hired another person, so I didn't ever take the sabbatical. So it's highly variable. You're the first person working for your startup, but you may not actually be hired or be getting paid. So let's say you're doing it on, part-time, you have a day job that's paying the rent, and, you're working on your startup, and whatever function you run out of gas on first is really what it's going to come down to. If you're, if you need somebody to write code, if you need somebody to go do marketing and selling, if you need somebody to do chemistry, if you need somebody to do whatever it is, that's who you're probably going to bring on next. Does that make sense? It depends on your startup, and it depends on your capabilities, whatever you need the help with because you can't keep up, then that's who you're going to bring on.
Yes, thank you. And I think our next question probably it was related to your prior question about the board that was answered. Does anybody have any additional questions or comments? We still have about 5 minutes that we could spend.
Hello. That was the bird. Hello.
The bird has a question.
Yeah, the bird just said hello, but I don't think she really was. Hello? I'd bring you over here, but it would be wrong. The bird is a Moluccan cockatoo, so they're really big puffy birds. Oh, and hold on. So my co-teacher today, this is Bento. Hello, Bento. Bento is a sweetheart. Bento falls asleep here at the table with his head right there, and just So yes, we are the world of animals that are here for sure.
Here's one more question that we can probably take. So can you please elaborate more on stock option?
Okay. And this is a whole class to itself too that we should do. So stock options, here's what you do. You never just hand someone ownership in your company based upon an assumption of work that they may or are going to do in the future. If you think about this is a really good way to end up, like I said, with Joe off surfing in California, owning 30% of your company and just deciding that he doesn't have time to work on it anymore. And your recourse in that moment, your recourse is difficult to impossible because he's not violating probably any agreement. You're going to have to sue the guy. When people are like, well, sue them. Yeah, you realize that lawsuits actually like never really work out. They're not worth the money, and they're not worth the time. You may have to shut your company down, start a new company, just to get out from under the fact that you had a partner, you split the company 50-50. They worked for 3 months, and then they got a new boyfriend out in California. They went away, and now the two of them are happily ever after, and they own half your company. That's not tenable. So what you do is you do something called stock options. So you sign an agreement. Let's just say that we have a company, and there are 3 of us, Alla and me and Will Williams. I see a picture. So we're starting a company. And from the very, very get-go, we have made a decision that says, we haven't done much work on it yet. So we're all pretty much even up. It's not like I've been working on this for a year and a half and I brought these 2 guys in, because if that happens, then I have to kind of figure out what that year and a half was really worth. We're starting fresh. And we say, look, each of us is going to get 1/3 of the company. Okay, that's pretty fair. If there were 2 of us and splitting it 50-50, though, that's bad. Because what did I say about 2 people voting, 50-50, they can stymie each other. 3 people voting 1/3 each, it's always going to be 2 against 1. And you can have, because a company can't survive a deadlocked voting thing on something important. So the 3 of us each get 1/3. Now, if we give everybody 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, then if somebody walks off early, we have a problem, because we're counting on, let's say, 3 years of work out of each of us. So instead, what we do is we do a stock option plan for 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 of the shares. And they're vesting over 3 years. So it's 36 months. Every month, at the end of the month, unless someone raises an objection, like, I don't think Doug is pulling his weight on this. I don't think Alla did any work for us last month. Unless someone raises an objection, as each month clicks off, then 1/36 of that 33% of the company becomes vested. And that means that it's now yours if we end everything right now. So here we are, and we're vesting, and it's going great. And let's say it's gone for a year and we're really developing well, and and one of us gets a job offer we cannot refuse, because life works that way. There's no way that you can predict what 3 years of your life is going to be like, the next 3 years. So Joe comes to us, or Will, or Alla, or me, comes to the other 2 and says, listen, I put in a year on this. I'm really happy with my work. I know you guys are happy with my work. I think it's all fantastic, and I vested in 1/3 of my 33%. So, I basically vested in 11% of the company. But I've really got this other opportunity I want to go and chase. And so I don't want to leave you guys in the lurch, but I'm leaving you guys a little bit in the lurch. And the 2 of us, the other 2, say, oh, we're sorry to see you go. And yes, this is maybe really inconvenient, but, you have vested in 1/3 of your stock. So you have 11% of the company. So, okay. So because, we'll stop the agreement here, and, boom, here's your stock certificate if you want it, or the plan, the incentive stock option plan will probably say that as of the time you leave, you have a year to exercise, your options, whatever, because they're tax considerations and all this. And, and off you go. And, everybody's okay here. We're okay. The other 2 are okay, because you have left behind 22%, right? You're not, oh, I only put in a year, bye guys, but I'm keeping all 33%. No, you're keeping only what you vested, 11%, and that's fair. And then the other 22%, well, are the contract is ended, the agreement is gone. So that is basically still owned by basically the company, Now, if that never got issued to anyone else, then eventually it'd get cut in half and divided up between the two people who remained. But the odds are very good that that 22% is what you're going to be using in terms of incentive stock options to get someone else to come in here to replace the guy that just left, because you were probably needing his services. So that's what, if you look it up online, it's called an incentive stock option program, an ISOP, or just ISO. And, this is the way to do it. There's no other methodology. I mean, this is how you do it. It's every other methodology that you can do has weird things. And actually, what you're really going to do is what's called, you can look these up. It's an 83B election with the IRS, and you're going to do a reverse stock option plan, reverse clawback. Now, what that just means is day one, the person gets ownership of all of the shares, but it's what's called a restricted ownership. And then every month that clicks, the person gets ownership of all the shares, but the company has a right to claw back or take back all of the shares. And then what's going to happen is every month, click, 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 36 months, the company is going to lose 1/36 of the ability to take back all the shares. Now, why do you do it this way? Purely for tax reasons. Because it's structured this way, which is backwards, what's going on is the employee takes ownership of all of the shares day one, and thus writes a check to the IRS day one for taxes on all of the shares, which on a startup company are basically zero. And then once that happens, the employee now, as the company loses the ability to claw back, what happens is that there are no tax consequences for the increase in the value. Long story short. But that's what incentive stock option plans are all about, is you have the right to this ownership, not the absolute. Yeah, dogs, the FedEx guy just showed up. Okay, so any other questions? Anybody want to adopt some dogs? No, just joking. They're adorable.
Thank you, Doug. We're about 5 minutes over time. So I think that probably was our last question, but just to add that Doug Humphrey is our entrepreneur in residence, and he is to those who are students at the University of Maryland, students, faculty, or staff at the University of Maryland, or at Bowie State University, Morgan State University, University of Baltimore, and Coppin State. So if you are a student, faculty, or staff at one of those schools, you will be able to sign up to spend an hour with Doug if you would like to kind of dig in and spend a little bit more time about talking about your specific questions and your specific case. So
and please absolutely do it. I mean, I had a great chat with a couple of days ago with an entrepreneur, and we were on for almost 3 hours because she had lots of questions. And it's so much easier when you can just sit there and talk it through, and then you go, I understand, as opposed to trying to read it here and read it there and chase it around. So please feel free to request a meeting.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Doug, and thank you to those who joined us today, and for asking really great questions. I will share the slides and the link to the video once the video is done being processed and is posted on our Startup UMD YouTube channel. Again, thank you very much.